Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Full Metal Cast. A little bit of a different episode this week. No stoic quote, as I'm not really going to be going over anything super deep, super important. Instead, it's a bit of an arts and crafts video as one second, go over how I painted my rifle. And actually, it's a bit of a funny story how I painted this, and I'm going to try to keep this as interesting as possible for those who only listen to the audio. Maybe you're at work, maybe you're driving in the car. I'm going to do a bit of a commentary over the video of me painting, prepping, all that of said rifle here. But all in all, it was a pretty cool experience. I actually did this while I was on the road with limited supplies. And I'll get into that because it's actually kind of a cool, interesting story. And I think it turned out a little bit better because I ended up so short-handed in the materials I had available to me. Don't mind this bad dragon fleshlight looking fucking thing on the end here. A video to come on that. I teased that on the Instagram. I'm gonna go over what this stock is down the road here. This isn't supposed to be a gear channel. I never set out for it to be a gear channel or a how-to or a training channel, but this was a really cool experience, and I did this ahead of a class I'm going to be taking in October. So maybe more to come on that as well. But I'm going to jump into, or rather go through, what I had in mind with this. So I rock a multicam sort of plate carrier. I have a multicam helmet, as you can see behind me, working on acquiring other multicam sort of gear, whether that be, pants, combat shirt, jackets, etc. Sort of the vibe I'm trying to go with the camo and with the kit I plan on rocking, just given my surroundings. Multicam seems to just really be the best. I'm gonna put this down for now until I need to go over it a little bit later here. And so it just made the most sense for me to kind of follow that sort of color scheme. And actually, as I'm about to show you as I go through the step-by-steps here, I show the products that I use. Rustoleum actually makes a camouflage sort of kit, if you will. It's a box of 6 cans, and it provides all of the colors necessary to do that. That's exactly what I bought. Again, I'll show you the picture of what it is. All of the equipment I use, I bought with my own money. I have no affiliation with the brands. This is not, they didn't send me anything to review or to shill. This is just stuff that I picked that I thought would work best. And all I used to paint that was just like Scotch tape, Scotch blue painter's tape, Rustoleum camouflage paint, and dish soap. And that was it, and rubbing alcohol. I needed some rubbing alcohol and some cloths, but we'll get into that for a minute. This is actually my very first rifle I ever bought. Back in riot season, or before riot season really kicked off, I already had a Glock, had a pistol, and I figured, you know what? I need to expand my arsenal a little bit and get familiar with a rifle system. And so at the time, there were great deals on the Smith& Wesson MP Sport 2s. Came with a Crimson Trace red dot. I got it for an absolute steal. I think I got it for under 600 bucks at the time. And that was the very first rifle I had. It came with the carbine length sort of hand guard, the iron sight gas block. So there's been a lot of work done to it. Obviously, I won't grab it again. You'll see it in the video. Got a full length rail on it. Changed out the gas block. A lot of other things done to it as well. Different trigger group, different bolt carrier, charging handle, stock, etc. Changed up a lot of it, customized it to my needs and what I wanted to run. But as I was about to set off for this course, I wanted to bring a rifle that I know I have shot a lot with, that I trust, that is reliable. I've put thousands and thousands of rounds through that. I'm very comfortable with it. I'm very familiar with it. I have other sort of Gucci guns that I have built with some shorter barrels that are a little spicier, but for the class I'm going to be taking, I want to take a sort of my do-all rifle that I currently like to rock. I don't have any sort of IR or night vision goodies on that one. I am still getting used to reliably using my night vision, so I don't feel fully comfortable making any of the other guns I have set up with sort of IR lasers and illuminators on them. My real go-to rifle, I'm still using white light as my means of identifying targets in the dark. as I become better with that. So I decided to start with this one. It's also the cheaper one, as I mentioned. It's the first starter rifle, that Smith& Wesson. So I didn't really feel too bad painting it, um, in case I messed it up, since it was my first time around. I do want to paint all of the others. But with that in mind, I think I will just jump right into the process. I'll start rolling some of the videos, excuse me, that I took while I was on the road. Someone was very generous to let me use their house and their backyard to paint, knowing their neighbors were home. So I kind of had to hide a little bit behind the fence to avoid, excuse me, really, you know, scaring the very rural, crowd that, I will say was a town that probably wouldn't take too kindly to somebody just pulling out their black rifle in the backyard and hitting it with a rattle can. So I think that's another thing you should consider. You need a well ventilated space, maybe a private space, depending on where you live. And then, but we'll get into that later as well. So I'm gonna go roll this video as I start commentating. So here I am just set up in the kitchen that I was in. I'm using the Scotch Blue painter's tape here, sort of a wide roll. I think that's probably the best size to get the job done. You need to tear off some smaller pieces. And really, I am only going to use this tape to block off, my trigger. Some people say you don't have to block off the trigger, but I have a bit of a different trigger system, a different trigger group in there. I really didn't want to mess with it. I didn't really want to run the risk or really worry about it. So I figured I would tape up the trigger so that no paint got on it or up in it. And I'm also going to end up taping the scope, even though there's scope caps on it. I'm going to make sure that there's no way any paint or aerosol could possibly sneak through the scope caps onto the lens, the front or the back. And I'm also going to tape off the tip of my light. I don't want there to be any paint covering up my light up there as well. There's some debate online about whether or not, you should take off your grip, whether you want to paint your grip or not. It's totally personal choice. I decided to take off the grip. I already have an FDE Magpul. I think it's the K plus, whatever the more vertical grip angle is, for this rifle. So that's already on it. It's already sort of going to fit the paint scheme. I usually wear gloves with this anyway. That's another thing I should note if you're going to be rattle canning your rifle. Paint's gonna come off. It's gonna wear off on your hands. Just be aware of that. So maybe pick a rifle or, train with gloves, or just don't mind getting your hands a little dirty as well. Just like the grip being personal preference, whether you want to paint it or not, same goes for the buttstock. Um, I would say paint it. Just know that's probably going to get on your cheek as you sort of get a sight picture, or on your plate carrier shoulder, depending on what you're shooting it with. I opted to take it off. As you saw, I have a very different stock on this thing. And for the video I'm making with it, I don't want to get it dirty. So what I'm doing here, I did remove the bolt carrier group. Again, another thing online people seem to argue a little bit about, because the dust cover is going to, make sure everything's good. I yanked it out. I rendered the weapon safe and just took it out. I don't have to think about it. So obviously I still close the dust cover, but BCG is out. What I'm doing here is I have some rubbing alcohol and a paper towel, or a washcloth, and I am just degreasing anything, I'm just degreasing the surface of the rifle. So any carbon, any lube, particularly lube that's hanging around where the trigger group pins are, the takedown pins, the safety selector, the mag release, um, the bolt release, making sure that all that lube is off, making sure that it's a dry surface, it's a clean surface, so that any paint I try to apply is going to stick. It's not going to run. It's not going to do anything funky. So I'm giving it a thorough brush over. I gave it a quick dry wipe before I started filming, but now I'm just going over with rubbing alcohol, making sure that there is no residue sort of left on the rifle. I didn't really care too much about the muzzle brake, only because I know there's a ton of carbon on it already, and it's going to get dirty anyway. So if paint doesn't stick, I'm not going to be too bummed about it, because that's going to become a dirty mess. Anyways, so here I am, just moving forward with taping up the trigger group. I'll probably fast forward a little bit here. I did have some trouble initially. Again, this is going to be the most painstaking part of the process, degreasing and taping. I struggled getting tape around the trigger group, as well as where the grip attaches. trying to make sure that no paint could get into the hole where you screw on the grip, as well as the hole that holds the detent and the spring for the safety selector. That whole grip sort of area was there's a lot of carbon buildup on it. It was very greasy. It was hard to get paint to stick, or tape to stick, excuse me. I finally did get it to stick, but what I ended up doing really was just kind of twisting parts of tape until they were thick enough to fit in those holes, the screw hole for the grip, as well as the hole for the indent and the spring for the safety selector. And I did end up getting tape wrapped around it, but that's honestly what I found best here. Just twisted it small enough to fit in there. I did actually remove the spring and the detent for the safety selector, and put them in the grip. The Magpul grip has that sort of opening. I just tossed them in there, kept them in my bag off on the side so I didn't lose them. But yeah, that degreasing part, this taping part is very tedious, but you want to take your time with this. You want to make sure you are very thorough with this because whatever you do not tape, it will get paint on it. If you do a good job, that means you did a good job. But again, whatever you tape is going to get paint on or in it, so make sure it's covered. So again, skipping forward here, fast forwarding a little bit, I get through the sort of the grip area here. I'm now moving forward onto the Surefire light. I have or a stream light rather, sorry. I'm not that Gucci. I'm still rocking Streamlight. I'm getting there. I gotta grow this channel a little bit more before I can afford the good stuff. But just again, just covering all of that clear lens. I want to make sure no paint, nothing can possibly get on that lens. So I'm using a couple pieces, making sure that I'm really getting my hands around the edge there, making sure that there's no air between the tape and the lens, really making sure I have a good connection, making sure that, again, nothing can possibly get on or in there. I'm bumping forward a little bit more here, making sure the trigger's taped up, as you can see, being thorough, that there is some space, on the top of that sort of like where the trigger drops down. There is space up into the receiver. I wanted to make sure there was tape in there so that no aerosol or no paint found its way up in there to really grime up or guck up the trigger group I have in there. Spent a good amount of time making sure that was good. Again, you're going to get a little frustrated. There's obviously a lot of carbon, a lot of lube there. So I had to wipe it down a little bit, had to apply multiple pieces, but really stuffed it up. It didn't look as pretty, but it did keep everything clean and nice in the end. So take your time. Don't get frustrated. There's plenty of time to paint. The paint actually dries very quickly, which is something I'll mention a little bit later here. But just be super thorough. You can't have too much tape in an area. If you're not sure, apply more tape. Because again, whatever you don't tape, it's going to get dirty. It's going to get paint on it. So now I flipped open my scope caps. I am making sure that, again, similar to the flashlight lens, all of the glass in the scope is completely covered. So I'm doing the back now, it's a little bit off camera. Again, the gun is rendered safe. The bolt carrier group is not even in it. I had to open it up to make sure that there's no round in it as I took out the bolt carrier group. So it is completely safe. Shown for the camera there's no way that any paint is getting in that with or without the scope cap. And the same is going to apply for the front of the scope, even though it's smaller. Oh, what I'm doing here is I'm making sure the adjustment points for the scope as well as the battery for the scope are tightened down extra tight. Again, I'm not applying any tape there, just making sure that no paint can get inside there, really torquing those down. One thing, if you have an LVPO or an adjustable optic as such, there are marks along the back of the scope. As you can see, I'm just rocking a SIG 1:6 LPVO, nothing Gucci. But if you prefer to be able to see your adjustments, maybe tape it up. Just a thought. I completely, paint over them. As you can see, there's no tape there. I know it's a 1:6, so I'm either going to be rocking all the way to 1, somewhere in the middle, or somewhere closer to the end. I didn't really care too much about the zoom. Maybe I'll change my mind, in which case I can probably rub some of the paint off, but just something to keep in mind if you have an LPVO. And here I am again, just adjusting the front of the scope here, making sure, or taping up the front of the scope rather, making sure just like the back, no paint will get on that glass, whether the scope cap is open or closed. You're gonna have some tape that kind of goes around the inside of the scope, not on the glass. That's fine. It's honestly just more protection. Again, more tape. There's no such thing as too little tape. And that looks really ugly, but it's actually very flush against the glass on the inside, so there's nothing to worry about there. One thing to note, as I'm actually going to pause the video here, I had an ambi safety selector on this thing, and for whatever reason, I either lost or removed the right side safety selector switch. I am looking for replacement, but because I did that and I removed the detent and the spring for the safety selector, when the gun was laid down like it is here, that safety selector wanted just to fall straight out. So I kind of wrestled with that a little bit. I taped it up when I painted one side, and I kind of had to hold it up when I painted it again. Something to keep in mind though, maybe you do opt to keep the grip on. If you have an ambi selector, it's not going to go anywhere, obviously. But my mistake, I kind of had to wrestle with it. It wasn't too much of a problem, but just something to keep in mind that may make your life easier as you plan this out and, try to paint your own rifle. The barrel, yep, almost forgot about the edge of the barrel. You don't want any paint going in the barrel. Just don't want to deal with it. So what I did, you can find, a paper towel to do this with. I just found pieces of blue tape and I kept on like almost rolling them together until they were wide enough and created a tight enough sort of seal to go through the muzzle device and into the barrel. And really just twisting it in, really stuffing it in there until it was tight and I couldn't really push it any further to know that it was a really good seal on the end. And then once I'm done with that, I just slapped an empty mag into the rifle. Again, I don't want any paint going into the mag well. I wasn't going to tape it. Plus, why not? It looked cool to paint a mag, I believe. So I slapped a mag into that, and then I stepped outside. So again, now you're outside, make sure that you can't be seen, or if you are seen, it's by people who don't really care about what you're doing, who maybe aren't going to call the police on you, even though it's not that big of a deal. You probably don't want to deal with it. This is that spray paint kit that I mentioned. Rustoleum makes it. I bought this on Amazon. It's a 6-pack of spray paint cans, specifically designed for camo spray paint. It's supposed to be the tough sort of paint that you want to use for painting your gun. It's heat resistant, I believe. Just a little more rigid rather than your normal spray paint. And in the case, I show what I use, but it comes with one sort of FDE color can, and then two dark brown, two dark green, and one light green. So the one thing I will say as I play this through here is be cognizant that you only have one can of like the light brown, that sort of FDE shade that I'm going to show here, because that's going to be the base layer. That was my base layer, especially if you're trying to do a multicam sort of finish. That's going to be your base layer, and you only have one can. So I use just maybe, I would recommend, yeah, this sort of desert khaki, this 1917 khaki is what it's called. You only get one can of this. So keep that in mind as you use it. It's plenty for one rifle, I will say. I got away with using just sort of three, what is it? Three coats on this side of the rifle here that you're looking at now, when I really could have done one light coat and then like a second thicker coat instead of three coats. I was just being thorough when I could have just easily gotten away with two coats, which is what I did on the other side. But again, just something to keep in mind. If you want to do three and just go at your own pace, by all means, go at your own pace here. Give it a little spray on the side or somewhere on like a scrap piece of cardboard or paper, just to get a feel for what the distance you should hold the can from the gun is, what shade it is, so you know you're going to paint it exactly what the shade you want to paint it. But as you can see, I'm not holding it right on top of the rifle. I'm holding it maybe a foot or so away. And I'm not holding it down. It's not a continuous stream. It's just quick bursts, constantly moving, so that I'm not really hammering one position. So it's not dripping. Again, there's no paint globbing in one area. It's not running on one area. I'm making sure, though, that everything is covered sufficiently, but keeping it moving. And again, there's plenty of paint to do this. More than three times for each side. So don't feel bad about, going light, especially on the first coat. The first coat should be light. You don't really want to hammer it because any imperfections are only going to be more pronounced as you continue to layer it on. Yes, the camo pattern will likely hide imperfections, but since you're doing it, they're going to stick out a little more to you. So just keep that in mind. Keep it moving. Keep it about a foot or so away. don't be afraid to go light. And here's just like the second coat here. Just making sure or the second, maybe the third coat. I may have forgotten to film the second coat. Honestly, again, I'm on location here. Someone was generous enough to let me use their house and their yard. So again, for the third or the final coat, you just want to make sure that you get everything sufficiently. So you can no longer see the Sig Sauer logo or the adjustments on the scope. I'm making sure everything that is black or red, because again, it's my first rifle, it has shitty red trim that I've been slowly chipping away at replacing, is covered. Everything is going to be tan that I want to be tan because again, this is going to be the base layer, and I want to make sure it's completely covered before I move forward in applying the pattern or painting anything else on the rifle. So I'm touching up any parts of the grip, the light, the receiver, the rail, the scope, everything. The charging handle there I touched up again, making sure that it is completely covered, that tan color that is going to be the base. Then when you're done with one side, you wait for it to dry. I have found that this paint dries very quickly so long as you're holding it far away like I am here. It takes maybe 10, 15 minutes for it to dry enough to the point where I could flip it over here. So as you can see, I taped the safety selector because it just was falling out without the detent and spring. But now I'm on this side, I can remove that tape. And again, holding it about a foot or so away, keeping it moving constantly. I am layering this first coat on a little bit thicker because I found I can get away with that based on how quickly it dries and how well it's applying to the rifle here. So laying on this first coat a little thicker, only do two coats on this side. You can easily get away with two coats using this Rustoleum paint in my experience. But again, feel free to take your time, go slow, apply as little as you need just to get comfortable with it, and then move forward here. But again, making sure that the same applies to this side as the other side, not keeping it in one place for too long, not really hammering this thing home, just making sure that this first layer is just a good starting point. And then for coat two, just making sure that where any black is peeking through or where the tan isn't strong enough or dense enough, just making sure that it's a sufficient thickness, if you will, of tan. So as you can see, I'm hitting that rail, I'm hitting the grip, hitting that light switch, that pressure pad, if you will, and making sure that it is a thick base tan because again, that's just going to make the browns and the greens I apply later pop a little bit more. This is a strong, thick tan, making sure the scope's good here, all the little nooks and crannies, constantly keeping it moving. Even if I do see a lot of tan is needed in a place, I'm not going to hold it. I'm just going to keep moving it to avoid really piling on the paint and having it run because then it just looks ugly. It's going to take a long time to dry. And again, don't feel like you have to only do two or three coats, take your time. If you rush it and you fuck it up, again, since you did it, you're going to know it's fucked up and it's going to bother you more than anybody. So don't be afraid to take your time. I do a couple of touch ups here after the second coat. It's not really a full third coat, but just making sure that it's evenly applied throughout. And then again, wait 10 to 15 minutes for this side to dry as well, because it's going to get a little messy now for the fun part. So after you have your base colors applied, we're going to now finally apply that camouflage pattern. Now I did actually buy camouflage stencils, like a multi-pack off of Amazon. However, like an idiot, what I what I forgot to pack in the car was the stencils. And so as I racked my brain trying to figure out what the fuck I wanted to do and how I really wanted to paint this thing without any sort of stencils or guide on how to paint camouflage patterns, I remembered seeing or hearing something that you could use, what was it? You could use dish soap as a means of a stencil almost, to where you can use it and wherever the dish soap is on the rifle, paint will not stick to it. So I don't really remember where I saw that first or how I remembered that was even a thing, but I'm very glad I did because that really did save the day. So after your one side has dried, you're going to want to grab your dish soap, as I demonstrated here, and grab the rest of the paint in the pack from Rustoleum. And what you're going to want to do is just zigzag that dish soap over the gun. You can do one pass. I did two, sort of doing opposite directions of the zigzag. Again, I had no idea how this was going to turn out. I got a little crazy with the soap on this side. I figured, what the hell? Might as well just give it a rip and see what happens. And as soon as you put the dish soap on, you're going to want to start hitting it with your browns, your greens. I decided to start with the lighter colors of that sort of camo spectrum and move up to the darker ones. So I grabbed the lightest green I could first from the Rustoleum pack. And I just, as you can see, with that lighter green, I'm holding it much closer to the rifle, and I'm only doing like lines up and down. Maybe some diagonal action to that, but I'm not going straight across the rifle. You still could, but I want to keep because I know I have two or three colors in total I want to apply on top of this tan. So I did a couple of stripes up and down in a diagonal fashion, very close to the rifle with that light green before I grabbed this dark green. And then where that green, that lighter green sort of ended, I went next to it with this darker green. And again, very close. I'm not going to do multiple coats of this because it's so close. I am keeping it moving very quickly though, as you can see. Um, and again, making sure that I like the amount of green I'm putting on there. I can always go back with any color if I'm not happy with the result, but making sure that wherever that light green left off, I'm basically going to go through with that dark green right next to it. And then the same is going to apply for the brown. Wherever that dark green ended, I'm going to go right next to that basically with the brown color right here. And again, making sure that it's closer to the rifle, maybe less than a half of it, but moving very closely. I want that paint to go on thick because I'm not going to do multiple coats of this. You can see how close I am there. You can see how heavy it's getting laid on. It's not running though, because I'm moving so quickly and I'm not holding it in one spot. It's more than enough to make a difference with one pass. I kind of doubled up. You don't have to double up. I chose to double up with this in certain areas just to make that brown really, uh, really pop, really stick out. And as you can sort of see, the lighting here is kind of weird because of the tree, but you can see where that soap is and where that tan is still coming through, where the spray paint isn't sticking to it. And what's really cool is that maybe you didn't move quick enough after hitting the rifle with your soap before grabbing the colors and hitting it. What happens is, and you might be able to see it when I get closer shots up of it here, especially around that safety selector. Some of the browns and the greens almost got captured in sort of like bubbles, I guess, in the soap, if you will, and that made its way to the tan. So it's not just pure tan or that FDE shade around the greens and the browns. There's like some speckle that got in there too, which was really cool. And again, I think because I opted for dish soap and not a camo stencil, I was able to get a very irregular, very almost natural camo sort of pattern, if you will, which was really cool. And it's honestly cheaper than buying stencils too, but it's completely your preference. I'm just sharing my experience. So again, I really just went through one pass with each can. I'm touching up a little bit here with some of the lighter greens because some of the darker colors kind of took center stage. So I'm making that lighter green pop a little bit in areas where I hit it with originally. And then let this sit for, 15, 20 minutes. Give it like a little like touch test, because it is going to lay on the other side. You're going to have pressure on it as you go to paint the other side of your rifle. And then the same's going to apply for the other side now. You'll flip it over and you're going to hit it with the soap again. So hitting it with that same sort of zigzag pattern going towards like almost like a forward slash towards the front of the rifle. And then I came back the other way, kind of doing the other side and just did some random slashes there. And then starting with the same sort of lighter end of the color spectrum, moving to darker only because the darker is going to swallow that lighter color, if you will, or overpower it. I think everyone has their own method to the madness, but that's just how I did it. And again, getting real close, as you can see here with this lighter green, you can sort of see it a little better coming through with this lighting and this angle. But going through, making sure it really pop, hitting it twice here because I knew from the last side that this lighter green does get sort of overwhelmed. It does come out very well though, as you'll see, but and you'll feel it out with your own rifle, how close you have to hold the can to the rifle, how many passes you have to make, how long you have to hold it in one spot. But when you're just feeling it out, move quickly and move far away to be safe, and then move closer and hold it longer as you get a feel for the flow of the can and how it's adhering to the rifle. So hitting it up with some dark green here. Again, not going over the light green, but rather next to it as best I could in varying directions, as you can see. Make sure that light's good. Everything's covered with a different green here, basically. I think the cool part about going from light to dark, just in my opinion, is if you do end up overlapping, that overlap is going to look a lot more crisp with a darker color going over a lighter color versus lighter going over darker. So after the dark green, I grab that dark brown, that dark earth brown, whatever it's called. I'll make sure the colors are on screen too as I grab them here, and so it shows how I'm painting and what I'm painting with. Again, not forgetting to get the scope here, not forgetting to get the light or the grip or the muzzle device even. And then I also sort of remember that the buffer tube is going to show a little bit too, regardless of what stock I have on. So you don't have to get the whole thing, but sort of remembered just to, touch up the area that might be showing just so everyone knows how real of an operator you are based on how much paint you put on your rifle. And yes, you will hear people say that this does diminish the value of your rifle, but again, this is a Smith & Wesson M&P Sport 2, my very first rifle. I got it for very cheap. It's been modified to hell already, tastefully and not so tastefully, but it's my rifle and it's what I like. And I'm not no intention of selling this thing, excuse me. So I don't really care about painting it. So maybe with your first rifle, keep that in mind. But this side is done as well, and this dish soap can just stay on there as the paint dries. That's totally fine. I gave it in total like 30 minutes to dry now. What I did was I basically propped it up on the magazine and the grip so that not one side was sitting, on the cardboard. I just let it dry for 30 minutes then, both sides, so that I made sure the paint was cured. If you can wait longer and you're not worried about bugs or leaves or trees falling out, that's another thing to be cognizant of as you're outside. Shit is in the air. There were a couple of bugs that ended up on this thing. I had to sort of blow them off or pick them off and touch up the rifle. Make sure if you're under a tree, it's not windy or there's aren't a ton of leaves or other stuff falling from it. But I let that sort of cure for about 30 minutes. And then once you know it passes the touch test, when you know it is dry, what I did basically was I took one of the blocks or bricks that I had the cardboard on, wrapped it up in that garbage bag so I didn't like scratch the top of the muzzle guard, if you care. And then I just found a hose with like a gentle sort of like spray option, turned it very low, and just proceeded to rinse the soap off of the rifle. And again, just like the spray paint, I'm not holding this hose in one spot, really hammering one spot of the rifle. I'm keeping it moving, and really the only thing I'm worried about here is water getting into, the batteries on the scope or the flashlight. Um, and my mindset really should have been if my stuff's going to break because I am sprinkling it with a hose, then it's probably not good equipment, and I shouldn't have it on my dual rifle anyways. But just something to keep in mind that you are going to be, rinsing this soap off of your rifle. And I also know that those Streamlight flashlights, especially with the switches, the pressure pads, have had some strange issues with water and moisture to where they can't turn off if they get too wet or something. So as you can see here, I am testing it. I'm making sure nothing broke there. But I'm making sure that there's no soap residue. I'm not seeing any sort of that oil slick finish that you do see when there is soap sort of in like water hanging around the rifle. I found a little bit sort of in the holes of the rail there, so I'm blasting that off there. Again, moving it very quickly. It's not a really strong blast. I'm not pressure washing it because again, I don't think the paint is fully cured, but it's dry enough to the point where after letting it sit for 30 plus minutes, I can hit it with the water and it's just going to take the soap off and nothing else. So I am carrying it still by the buffer tube as well as by like sort of the tip of the muzzle device, making sure I'm not really touching a bunch of the areas that I just painted that I really care about, messing up the camo pattern just to be safe. Um, I don't know what I'm doing here. Oh, I'm picking it up by the sort of like the sling sort of loops there to avoid messing up the pattern that I just painted. And I'm gonna let that dry. Not so much the paint, but actually the water. Let the water sort of drip off of it. Again, holding it up by the magazine and by the grip before moving it inside and sort of letting it sit out overnight. It depends on, whatever sort of paint you use. I let it fully cure 24 hours before chucking it in my case. It's like a soft, like rifle bag, just to be sure again that I'm not messing up that thing I took so long to paint. But really didn't take that long, honestly. The longest part, like I mentioned, was prepping the rifle, degreasing it, taping up the parts that you didn't want to get painted in. And overall, it turned out very well. I'll put up some other pictures too in different lights outside, like sort of lighting environments. This does look a little whitewash, a little gray wash when against my kit here, considering a little more green, a little more browns that are pronounced in this. This looks very good though, outside in like the shade and in the sun I have found. I am in a more, it's not a desert area, it's not a dense forest area either, though. But there is a good mix of sort of dry grass and tree cover and just normal greenery as well. So this sort of multicam vibe fit very well. And again, very, very cheap and very easy to do. Scotch blue painter's tape, dish soap, any dish soap. I've seen Dawn. I use whatever organic Trader Joe's stuff that my such a generous person had in their house they allowed me to use. And that Rustoleum spray paint kit from Amazon, which was not much at all. And I have a bunch of leftover paint. I don't know if I have a bunch of the FTE that I used for the base coat left, but I have plenty of dark green, plenty of dark brown, and light green left over as well. So I may even be able to do a paint job with one of those, like greens or browns as a base coat, which could be very interesting. So maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll steal one of my dad's old 16 inches that he doesn't use anymore because he's got a pretty Gucci Daniel Defense laying around. That's sort of his go-to now. I might steal one of his and play around with some of those, and maybe I'll share those works as well. But yeah, so you got a cool little mag out of that too that I painted with it. But yeah, highly recommend you do it. Um, Again, if you are not trying to resell your rifle, by all means go right ahead. Or if you are, just understand that it will impact the resale value. Also, be cognizant about any electronics you have on your rifle as well. Make sure they're waterproof rated or that they are sufficiently covered or just removed if maybe you're painting an airsoft rifle and maybe some of the equipment on that is not as um, duty proof or as hardcore as some of the other things that you will find on real rifles. But other than that, I can only encourage it. I think it was a great experience. I think it was a lot of fun. And again, it was super quick and easy. The longest parts were just prepping it and waiting for paint to dry. What you saw regarding the painting process was truly all the time I put into actually painting the rifle. The prep work maybe took all of 15 minutes, making sure it was degreased and taped up properly. The painting probably took another 20 minutes, and then drying took the longest too. Probably an hour plus, making sure it was fully cured. But again, yeah, feel free to ask any questions, DM me, email me, let me know if there's anything you're unsure about. I have stencils too. I can show you. Maybe I'll do some run through about how to use the stencils. But honestly, the dish soap, man, it's cheap. It turns out a very natural camouflage sort of pattern that's very sort of randomized. That honestly I probably couldn't pull off if I used stencils, anyways, without any experience at least. So give it a try. And again, if you don't like it, just hit it with another coat of that sort of FDE or whatever base coat you want to use and just cover it up. Because again, you're already painting your rifle. So don't be afraid to get a little messy. I know PSR did a video on how to rattle can your rifle where he basically said, in the tone or in the character of Bob Ross, happy little mistakes sort of mindset, just paint over it if you don't like it. You're already ruining it anyways, essentially. So definitely do it. Again, ask me if you have any questions. Did I do this to look a little more serious as I go to this class I signed up for? Yes, absolutely. But that is something that I wanted to talk about. The class I signed up for, it is not a beginner or a sort of fundamentals, if you will, carbine class, carbine, however you want to pronounce it, class. It's very much a moving around um, class. You're going to be running, you're going to be sprinting, shooting from compromised positions, working on reloads while moving, managing malfunctions with your weapon. And it was something I was very hesitant about signing up for. It was a very expensive class. It's in a different state. And I actually emailed the group that was issuing the class saying, hey, I am somebody who has plenty of time shooting at a flat range, shooting at trash, standing still. I've done that for many years. I have many hours. I have thousands of rounds doing that. I've shot many weapon systems doing that. But I don't really have the room or the means, and I certainly don't have the experience of going out and doing the sort of running and shooting drills you see, Lucas from T-Rex Arms or any of the T-Rex Arms guys doing. And I was worried about maybe holding up the class while doing that. And while I do think that is a legitimate fear, that was one that I was sort of able to rationalize with myself, like, hey, you got to push yourself and you got to be open, you got to be humble, you got to be open to being embarrassed by guys who are just better than you, who know more and know better than you. That's how you're going to learn. You have to challenge yourself. And so even after I sent the email being worried about my experience, being worried about holding people up and if I should do it or not, I basically emailed them back right afterward and said, you know what, fuck it. I'm signing up. I don't care. I can take a beating. I can be humbled, but I want to learn and I want to be better. So that was sort of the mindset I went into it. Is this sort of faking it to make it? I guess in a sense, sure, if I'm gonna show up with a Smith& and Wesson M&P2, it is what it is. Granted, there's been a lot of things changed about it from the barrel to the muzzle device, it's hardly even that anymore. It's really just the receiver. But it does have that big M&P2 logo on it that comes with these guns. So part of the reason why I painted it was that, yes, but also I think it'd be a good experience. You see a lot of guys talking about rattle cannon their guns, sort of fit their kit and sort of break up that weapon profile. So I did that, but also the class that I'm going to be taking sort of push me to do that as well. And this is also going to push me to get out with the time and the resources that I have, with the location that I have. I am lucky enough to have an outdoor spot to shoot on private land. Again, it is a little tight though, so doing the sort of moving around drills is a bit tough, but this is going to really push me to make the most of my time out there so that I can at least, I can walk the walk and talk the talk. If I'm walking around with this, I better be able to shoot like I've earned a camouflage or painted rifle. I don't know how many headshots you need in Call of Duty to get this paint job, but I gotta at least be able to, perform if I'm gonna have this. Otherwise, I'm no different than a LARPer or an airsofter. So this is really to push me. I'm gonna be humbled no matter what, though. I've accepted that. I'm fine with that, and that's really a mindset that I think everyone should adopt, especially in anything. This fitness, work, their job, school, religion, whatever it is, don't be afraid to be humbled, to be embarrassed even, to be shown up by people who have done the work, who have done the job, who are more experienced and who are better at different things. And whatever you need to do to get comfortable with that, maybe it's painting your rifle, um, by all means do it. Just keep in mind though that, buying the newest thing, whether it be, an ACOG and mini red dot, whether it be an LPVO, whether it be a, EOTech and a magnifier, whether it be a Hydra mount, whether it be the newest flashlight, the newest grip, the newest stock, whatever it is, that's never going to make you that super cool high speed guy. That's never going to make you that operator. That's never going to make you a good, businessman, a good parent, whatever it is. Sure, the professionals, the guys operating at the highest level in any of those fields will definitely have preferences, like I've mentioned. But one thing isn't going to be the fix all. Nothing's a true replacement for training, for putting the time in, for the blood, for the sweat, for the tears. That stuff is not bought, that's built. And you gotta put the time in and you gotta suffer a little bit for that. You gotta push the boulder. You gotta push the rock, if you will. So yeah, I didn't have a quote, but there's some stoicism for you. But with that, that's really it. That's how I went about painting my rifle. It was a super quick process. It took less than, a half, maybe even less than a quarter of an afternoon. Enjoy, crack yourself a beer after making sure your weapon is rendered safe, obviously. Maybe spark up a cigar and just have some fun. Maybe get some of the boys over. Do it together and see who comes out with the best rifle. And, obviously, share them with the page. Send them over to me and let me know your thoughts. Let me know your techniques and let me know your reasoning behind why you painted your rifle or pistol a certain way. But with that, I think that's really going to do it. This episode is coming out later than the usual Sunday. I try to get episodes out. I've been dealing with quite a wicked bug, actually. I'm not sure what I've been fighting. Uh, just been lingering around. So hopefully everyone's staying healthy. Hopefully everyone can enjoy the nice summer weather. I know there's a heat wave going on, but again, make sure you're getting plenty of sun, touch grass, go gym. It is only good for you. But stay metal. Talk to you guys soon.